But before the whole left side of the country catches socialism fever, let's listen to the other big winner in last Tuesday's election, Virginia Governor-elect Abigail Spanberger, who, before the 24 election, said things like, if the party didn't shift to the center, we will get fucking torn apart. And we need to never use the word socialist or socialism ever again. Well, she was right, but they didn't listen. Typical, am I right, lady?
Bill Maher keeps blasting his own side. And now his sights lock onto New York's fresh mayor, Zohran Mamdani. To the DNC, Mamdani is the newest glittering favorite, adored by nearly every liberal voice except one, Bill Maher. The judgment on Zohran's future atop the party is brutal and explosive. So smash the subscribe button and dive into this right now with zero hesitation whatsoever today.
At least the party has a clear choice here, very clear. One wing is saying don't ever use the word socialist again, and one is saying,
I am a democratic socialist.
Clear, huh? So how do we decide who's right? Well, it turns out we don't really have to flip a coin. We have the evidence. In 2024, 13 Democrats won in districts Trump also won, all moderates. This isn't rocket science. All the left-leaning think tanks have done autopsies on 2024, and they all came up with the same message: move to the center. Even the New York Times, which did so much to promote woke politics, now says the partisans are wrong, moving to the center.
Maher says the Democratic Party now resembles a house cracked straight down. The center, on one side, sits a rising bloc that openly toys with socialism, convinced the party should proudly adopt the label and all that follows. On the opposite side stand Democrats who refuse to even say the word, fully aware of how poisonous it sounds to everyday voters, beyond elite activist bubbles. But squarely places himself with this latter. He contends that socialism might play well at rallies and across college campuses, but it turns into electoral venom the instant it reaches working-class voters in swing districts. Maher cautions that history in the United States and overseas proves socialist branding drives away moderates, independents, and even loyal Democrats seeking stability and plain common. His warning is stark. The party keeps favoring ideological purity over practicality. It risks narrowing its tent and gifting wins to Republicans in future national elections.
Gen Z thinks socialism's wired and capitalism's tired and billionaires are what's for dinner. And who can blame them? If you're 30 and still sharing a bathroom with roommates, capitalism isn't working for you. People will reject any economic system where there's strange hair on the soap. No one wants to be approaching middle age and still writing their name on food before they put it in the fridge. So they're quiet quitting capitalism and texting socialism that they're down to Thing is, socialism will you. Because socialism, to put it simply, just doesn't work and has never...
Maher explains why socialism keeps pulling people in, and to him the reason is simple. He says many who gravitate toward it are middle-aged Americans who feel stalled, exhausted, or abandoned by a system that failed to keep its promises. For them, socialism begins to feel like a rescue rope, a final escape from money pressure, career letdowns, and a quiet sense of personal defeat. Maher doesn't sneer at that anger. It recognizes it, but he draws a sharp boundary between compassion and fantasy. In Maher's view, socialism markets reassurance, not answers. It offers safety without grappling with human nature, incentives, or how power truly works. His warning is direct and unapologetic. Socialism has never succeeded anywhere at any scale, and there's no reason to think it suddenly rebranding it with fresh slogans doesn't alter the result. It only postpones the disillusionment
Kids think that stuff that happened before their appearance on the planet didn't really happen, but it did. We've run this experiment many times, and the results are always obvious. Here's capitalist South Korea at night from space. Here's socialist North Korea. Yeah. In 1990, Venezuela was wealthier than Poland. But then Poland, finally free of Soviet-style economics, went all in on capitalism. And now their economy is as big as Japan. And people there have high wages, low inflation, cars, vacations, homes. Meanwhile, Venezuela traded capitalism for Hugo Chavez's Socialism for the 21st Century, which turned out to be like socialism in the last century, or any century. A mess.
It's tempting to look back through history and assume our ancestors simply misunderstood things, and that with modern insight, better intentions, and smarter minds, we can try again and finally succeed. Sometimes that works, but history also tends to repeat itself, especially when the core ideas never really change. Maher's argument is that socialism has not meaningfully evolved since the day it began. The wording may sound gentler, the branding more refined, but the fundamental machinery remains identical. Centralized authority, warped incentives, and concentrated power still produce the same results. And those results almost never end well for governments that tempt it. Ma insists that believing this time will be different is not optimism, it is denial. Overlooking decades of real-world evidence does not erase the danger, it virtually guarantees it. When history keeps sending warning signals, pretending they do not apply is a reckless bet.
One of its poorest. Low wages, high inflation, shortages, outages, 8 million people fleeing. If you think New York can somehow reinvent this wheel, you're in for a rude awakening. Zohran can't make your wishes come true. You're thinking of Zoltar.
Maher forecasts that if Mamdani pushes New York towards socialism, the city could become the next headline example of ideological failure. In his telling, the fallout wouldn't hit overnight, but it would feel disturbingly familiar. Wages would stall as companies scale back or pack up and leave. Investment would evaporate and job prospects would steadily narrow. Already strained infrastructure would worsen. Spotty power, decaying roads, and public services that charge more while offering to patch the widening budget gaps. Taxes would keep rising, squeezing middle-class families and small businesses to the brink. Maher insists this is not scare tactics. There's a recurring pattern. Wherever socialist policies gain ground, New York cautions is already costly and vulnerable. Layering ideology on dysfunction could turn fixable issues into lasting catastrophe. This point is blunt. Once decline sets in, undoing it is far more difficult than preventing it to begin with.
Look great until you meet up in the real world. For example, Bernie Sanders, his big thing was always bringing single-payer health care to our country of 340 million. But when liberal, tie-dyed Vermont tried to do it for a population of 626,000, it collapsed like that poor in the Oval Office last week. Bernie, AOC, Mamdani are not Democrats. They'll be the first to tell you that. They're democratic socialists, and that's a very different thing, and I don't think people...
Here, Ma slips into teacher mode, directing his message at those convincing themselves that socialism is a personal or national savior. It explains that the United States already contains strands of socialism built into its framework, whether people notice or not, from Social Security and Medicare to unemployment insurance and public schooling. The government has long used social programs to soften capitalism's roughest edges. These policies exist to act as a safety net, not to replace the entire economic system. Maher's argument is that recognizing these programs is not the same as embracing full-scale socialism. There is a vast difference between regulating capitalism and walking away from it completely. It maintains that capitalism, flawed as it may be, still fuels innovation, growth, and opportunity. Socialism, by contrast, advertises fairness but frequently produces stagnation and control. Reform is essential, but revolution is reckless.
Socialism, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, unemployment insurance, food stamps, veterans benefits, Pell Grants, COVID-era payments, farm subsidies, disability payments, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, corporate bailouts, and the jobs program that is building weapons the Pentagon doesn't even want. All that is socialism, much of it appropriate to soften the edges of capitalism, but the DSA are radicals about this concept, and radical economic policy is always ineluctably married to radical social policy. Their platform, for example, calls for completely open borders. They're for what Biden